All right, everyone, thank you for joining. My name is Anthony D'Ambrosio, and we'll be recording this session for people to view this at a later date and time after we complete this ACE webinar. I am the Atlassian Houston ACE leader. I'm joined by Larry and Ben, who are my co-leaders. In addition, I have Sridhar and Jeev from Atlassian, who will be speaking about the shared responsibility model and Atlassian's stance on backup. I also have Hernan from Avanti, who will be speaking from a partner's perspective on his experience with Atlassian shared responsibility model. And I have Andy Fernandez from HYCU, who will be speaking from HYCU's stance on how they're solving that problem and how to help you land safely in the cloud. Again, thank you for joining. I'll hand it over to Jeev.
Hi, this is Jeev. I'm a senior engineer with Confluence Cloud Migrations with Atlassian, responsible for leading and working on backup and restore of data, import and export of file spaces, and Confluence in itself. Yeah.
Hey, folks, I'm Sridhar Srinivasan, Senior Engineering Manager in Atlassian Confluence Cloud, part of managing migrations along with two other teams focusing on scalability of Confluence Cloud and reliability of Confluence Cloud.
While Hernan is working on that, I'm going to take a moment to introduce Maya Sutton, who is with Atlassian's community and learning team. She's the community manager that tries to wrangle Anthony, Ben, myself, and many others here on the North America, well, I guess in the Western Hemisphere, I should say, because you have South America too, right, Maya?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, thanks for the intro, Larry. Happy to be here. Hello to all the community members who made it to today's Houston ACE. So excited to have you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining us. All right. I can see Hernan on screen, so I'll be quiet now.
All right, so yours, Hernan.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me correctly? Just making sure because I don't see anything else.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Coming in loud and clear.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Hernan Montes. I'm founder and partner of Movante Atlassian Solutions Partner. I've been in the technology and IT sector for more than 20 years. 15 of those have been spent on specializing in the Atlassian ecosystem. I do specialize on complex issues, mostly on the system side of things, data center, but also have a lot of experience on cloud systems. Migrations and integration experts. I do love to migrate and integrate, and have a good opportunity. So I was invited here to talk a little bit about the shared responsibility model of Atlassian. What this is basically a framework that defines the security and management responsibilities from Atlassian and from the user perspective from the customers. Now, to give a more graphical, backup to this is the diagram that basically explains on a high level what's this responsibility of sharing the infrastructure. So in the Atlassian Cloud, Atlassian responsibility goes from the hosting, the different layers of the system, being databases and all the process in the DevOps section and the application level itself. And from the other side, the shared responsibility from the customers goes for the policy and compliance within their business, user management, information and data, and marketplace apps. So what this means is, and there's a big misunderstanding with some administrators or junior administrators in which what's the responsibility between each of the parties, right? So in many cases, some users may think that if something happens with their data, Atlassian is there to help them. And yes, Atlassian will help in some portions, in some extent, but it's not part of their policy to fix destructive events from users in an application. So with that being said, we go to a big process, or an important process that needs to happen here, and that's backups. So in Atlassian, you have the Atlassian Backup Manager, right? Well, let me go back to what happens in Atlassian. With DevOps perspective, what happens in Atlassian, they have a backup each day. It's called a snapshot from Amazon RDS systems. And this snapshot is held for 30 days. It is encrypted and can be replicated or restored across the data centers of a same AWS zone. So with this, we can think, oh, well, my data is secure. Well, no, there's a big spoiler here, and it's in documentation from Atlassian, and that's explained like it is. So Atlassian does not use the backups to revert customer-initiated destructive changes. What this means is if a user, an administrator, makes changes and deletes issues, deletes data, projects, anything that's really destructive to the data that holds from a company, they will help to some extent to recover that information, but it's not part of their support services. It's not part of their policies. So in this case, we really recommend you to have your own process as a client, as a customer, to back up your data, because you own your data and you're responsible for your data, right? So with this, let me just share a couple of oh my god moments that I experienced in the past. It's not the biggest of the oh my god moments, but those that I remember. So we have this this operation and audit and cleanup where the administrator was supposed to document all the system schemas, custom fields, the drill, know inside out the system contents, configurations, automations, workflows, all of that. So in this case, there was the administrator didn't know about the issue level permissions, or did know but not enough to document it correctly, right? So what happens here? They find these custom fields that do not have any information because the reporting will be based on those level permissions, and then afterwards they go ahead and clean up and they remove all of those custom fields, losing data, and what the consequences of this. Another example that I have is when you have like bulk changes, you need to bulk change a lot of issues, add new features or add new status to the workflows, whatever change that need to be on bulk. You can trigger via an automation workflow, and it's best to do it in a sandbox. That's best practice, right? Well, there's times when that sandbox is not updated to the latest changes of production, right? And also with that, you don't have a lot of the links and issue and related stuff to test it truly. And then when you do it in production, you end yourself with data loss or any changes that you didn't want, and they're destructive. So with this being said, you have the Atlassian Backup Manager as one of your solutions to the backups, right? So the backups last for 7 days. I mean, you cannot take a new backup for 7 days from the last one. It has 14 days of expiration on the cloud, which means that it's going to be removed. You have 60 days to restore anything that you downloaded for that backup. You have limited storage. You need to do a complete system backup, not only project or issues, but all the system, and not all the data types are included. Now, this is what it is documented, which is currently supported as the backup, what it's going to contain and what's not. And if you notice, there's a lot of things that is not contained on that backup, and they're really needed on today's business processes. So aside from this, you need to restore it to an empty Jira if you want to restore it with that backup. And for Confluence, you need to have that space not existing. So with this is why we as a solution partner, we recommend a backup as a service provider. And we divide this in three major opportunities that we can have with this backup service provider, and that's automated and on-demand backups, which means you have your backups at the time that you need it. And then you can restore granularity. So what that means is that you can restore on the level of projects, on the level of issues or attachments. You don't have to restore the whole thing. And then you have more compliance in data retention control. This is going to be aligned to your business, right, processes. So with that, I'm going to take it back to you, Anthony, and thank you for hearing me out.
All right, thank you, Hernan. All right, so I'll hand it over to Jeev to present.
Hi, thank you. Sorry for the last minute. Now let me just share my Chrome tab. Can you guys see now?
Yep, we can see your screen now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think it worked out. Thank you, Hernan, for presenting. I'm from Atlassian and Confluence, and my team's job specifically working on Confluence Cloud Backup. So what Hernan talked about, we're going to talk about some points he mentioned. So that's perfect, I think. So let's go on with it. So I'm going to focus on mostly how the Confluence backup architecture works and what do we provide and what improvements we have made in last couple of months. So let's get on to that. So this is the agenda. I'm going to discuss about the architecture first. So it's good to understand how the Atlassian architecture works and how the products are built on top of that architecture. So what are the challenges do we have currently with Confluence Cloud Backup, and what's the architecture of it, and what reliability and performance we are giving to our customers right now? So let's look into this diagram first. The way our Atlassian Cloud architecture is developed is that at the foundation we have cloud infrastructure, which adheres to all the standards and ISO and governance, data residency. And then on top of that, we have, of course, data management. We have Confluence data management. We have Jira data management. And then on top of that, we have built another layer where we do our authentication, authorization, storage of your data. For example, you export something, you take a backup, like where that backup is stored, when you download that backup, where you download from that, identity, how your users managed. So on this foundation services, we have built our whole Atlassian product suite. So we have work management, which is Confluence, which we're going to talk about right now. Then we have another products like Jira Service Management, Jira Software, and we also expose all this vertical and horizontal layers to a third-party app, Forge and Connect. So whoever is using our APIs get all these features automatically. I just want to lay an emphasis on whatever features all this product develop get the Atlassian wide security, governance, compliance like GDPR, ISO standard, everything out of the box. So we don't have to, the product suite does not have to do anything extra based on what Atlassian provides. So in a nutshell, how do we take care of compliance? Most of our, I think all of the products are GDPR compliance, Confluence included. So if you're taking a backup, and where that backup is stored temporarily for allow you to download is GDPR. For example, if you are in Europe, your data would be stored in Europe. Besides that, we also provide common control framework, meaning all the applicable standards like ISO, HIPAA are come with this product. So what I'm going towards is, so when we develop a backup solution, these solutions are already adhering to that particular standards. So you get that out of the box. So this is particularly when you're taking backup from your backup manager and Confluence admin. So let's go and take a deep dive on Confluence Cloud Backup. So as Hernan was talking about the frequency, how often you can take the backup, where the data is stored, how do you restore that data? I'm going to dive into that. So currently, in last couple of quarters, we were looking at the problems that Confluence backup faces. One was the backup was we cannot back new content type, as Hernan was mentioning that we don't back up all the time. So we made that change in last couple of quarters, Now you almost have everything be able to back up. Your Confluence data to begin with, you should be able to back up your whiteboards, which recently went GA, and then soon enough, you should be able to back up your databases. So tomorrow, if Atlassian introduces a new data type, that should be available to back up in a very, very short period of time. So one of the challenge was, how do we back up data spread up in all the different services? So this was one of the big challenges. The other challenge was, currently on the official documentation of Atlassian Backup Manager, we say we support 30 GB of data and around 80 GB, 800 GB of attachment. We actually took it that further. We need to update the documentation, but we are able to back up around 100 GB of data right now with 800 GB of attachments. This is not official yet, but we have resolved that, and we are able to back up large data volume. The other challenge was, so most of the customers, from their compliance perspective, they want the data and the attachments together in one zip file, which is actually a huge problem, because customers might have 100 of GBs of data plus a TB of attachment, which we have seen. So that was one of the challenge. The other is, how do we scale this to hundreds of thousands of tenants to have a reliable solution of 99.9% reliability? So these were the challenges, and these were also the goals for us. So I'm going to go to the architecture. This is a very oversimplified architecture, which I have tried to explain, which I'm trying to explain. So currently, we have an orchestration service. As you can see, this service is the heart of orchestrating the data from multiple sources. Like, for example, a request comes from the Confluence front end to say, okay, I want to back up my tenant's data. What happens is we back up data from different services. So let's say you have your whiteboards, you have your databases, you have your Confluence data itself. So we ask them to back up their data. We go and back up to a platform service, a media platform, which adheres to all the standards and compliance, which I talked in the previous slides. They go and process the data in media platform. Once we know that all the services have backed up their data, the next step is to zip those data. So we have another platform service which helps us to zip the data, which also have access to read those data. Also, just to clarify, this is all tenant-based separation. So no data is shared. Every tenant gets its own space in its own environment. So it's all tenanted based. So there is a clear separation of boundary between each particular tenant. So we make sure that security is at the top, and we want to ensure that everyone stays in their boundary. So this is the crucial part, where we want to zip all the data which has been backed up and return the zip file to the customer. So how did we address this challenges in this architecture? So let's go here. So we built an orchestration service which allows plugging of any microservice, meaning any data stored application service we should be able to back up. We have built the retry at the granular level, meaning a smallest component of an architecture can be retried. Okay, what happens if that still fails? We have built a checkpointing framework, meaning I can pick up from the last failed point. And of course, we had an amazing team of developers we worked on the last quarter. I do want to answer a couple of questions which Hernan mentioned. We allow customer to take backup every 24 hours, not 7 days. So every customer backup every 24 hours. Also, site admin has a way to clear those timers. So for instance, if a customer can clear the timer and can back up within 24 hours as well. So we have that capability. The other capability, yes, you have file valid for 14 days. With this new one, you can restore in the non-empty site or an empty site. Either way works. So that also is possible. It's an additive operation, meaning if you restore your backup data in an empty site, it would work fine. If you back up your data in non-empty site, it would also work fine restoring to your backup file of data. So where are we right now? Currently, we are at 99.9% reliable. We are still maturing our system. The new system is the development we made. We are still making sure we have a good eye on it and making sure we stay on the standard. And we are able to back up around 100 GB. 30 GB is official. We're going to take that effort to go and update the official documentation and plus 1 TB of attachments. I have some question and answers. I'm not sure, Anthony, if you're taking questions now or how are we doing that?
Sure. If anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat and we'll be able to answer them. You won't be able to speak. You'll be able to communicate through the chat on this call.
Thank you.
Not any questions at the current moment.
To introduce myself and thank the other speakers. I'm Andy Fernandez. I'm the director on the product side here at HYCU. We're an Atlassian Ventures firm and a marketplace partner as well. I actually am coming here in a different angle. I am not the Atlassian expert. What I am an expert is in the data protection side of the house. My entire career has been spent on virtual cloud SaaS backup and over a decade of experience really focusing on how do we protect data at every point in time. And one of my favorite conversations is to actually talk about it in the context of SaaS. Everyone here has probably had very, very mature conversations around VM backups, right? When you're hosting things, it's very easy to get in the weeds and understand your responsibility. But for some reason with cloud, and this is not just Atlassian, this is AWS, this is Google, this is every other major cloud vendor, but also Atlassian as well, is making sure that customers and users are fully aware of the shared responsibility model. Why? Well, because the cloud brings incredible flexibility. One of the things that I like to mention here, especially, is when you are managing your own infrastructure, especially if you think about your IT team on the data center side, there is a lot of room for error. In fact, when we're dealing with customers from a ransomware perspective, it wasn't some incredibly sophisticated attack that got them. It's that people were forgetting to patch. So there's so many things that comes from value of the cloud. Not only because of the features, not only because of the interoperability, but also simply because you're reducing your workload. You're reducing the workload on IT. But in order to get that great power and great responsibility, you need to make sure that you're using it in the right way and that you know exactly what your responsibility is versus Atlassian. So the one thing that I want to mention here in this slide, and I just want to use this as a perspective, is there has never been more attention on third-party risk management than it is today. And we all know it from the various obvious elephant in the room around CrowdStrike. But the whole point here is there's so many scenarios where customers didn't realize their responsibility. And a lot of these issues could have been avoided if they simply understood their responsibility when it comes to backup, when it comes to recovery. What is Atlassian's responsibility at the system level versus my responsibility as a user who's just deleted an attachment? So if we can go to the next slide. And sorry for being that next slide guy, everybody. That's just my fault. But what I want to share with some research that we have, because Hernan brought up some pretty amazing points, specifically around what are the actual scenarios, the real life scenarios where things can go wrong, right? Because there's human error involved. We're always going to make mistakes and we're going to delete stuff. We're going to misconfigure things. So we went out and made sure to give you a full assessment where we surveyed independently hundreds of IT leaders around this very problem, around what is the actual scope, what is the responsibility, what are the risks right now with people using cloud applications. And what we found was that this is very avoidable, because there is no doubt the cloud is the future. We just have to be responsible about it. So if we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to give everyone a copy of this. There's a full research paper that you can take a look into. We get into some pretty interesting stuff around identity access management and all these other areas as well. But the point here is the most common thread that we found was that there is a bit of a confusion between the customer and the vendor as to who was responsible for what. Hernan has done a tremendous breakdown of that. I don't have to go too much into that anymore. And the Atlassian team has talked about their incredible efforts around making sure that Confluence is available, making sure that they give you the right tools in order to do so. But it is alarming to think about how many folks, even in large enterprises, think they're not responsible. hey, if somebody deletes something in my email, I can call Microsoft, or I can call Atlassian to restore this specific asset that I've modified. It is not reasonable nor fair to ask them to do so because you are responsible for your data. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means, but I'm going to do a quick exercise here for everybody. Because Atlassian is a cloud platform. It's a SaaS. It is part of a tool chain. You're using this across your CI/CD. You're using it across your service catalog. But for everybody in the room, whether you're on the administrative side of Atlassian or within IT, I'd love to hear everyone's perspective on how many SaaS applications does your organization use? Because I think this is a very important thing to understand. If you go to the chat, and we will award something to the winner, but I would like to know how many SaaS applications your organization uses. Hernan by himself is probably using 20. That's good to hear. We're probably using 3 or 4 right now as we speak, but I love to hear from the audience as well, a little bit more guesses. And the reason that I'm mentioning this is I've already seen the guesses, and they fall exactly in line with our survey. The average amount of SaaS applications when you ask an IT leader was 22. And when you actually went to the real number in the organization, and I'm talking a mid-sized organization. So let's say 1,000 employees. I'm not talking about somebody the size of Atlassian. We're talking over 1,000 employees. They have over 200 SaaS applications. So take HYCU. We have around 300 employees. We use 60 ourselves. And the reason IT is always wrong is because anyone with a credit card can buy. And we know even at Atlassian, I can go and I can get my own project and a site, and with a credit card, I can pay for it. These things are very important because organizations don't realize how many other things they're using, let alone where does the responsibility lie. So let's go to the next slide. And this is why I like to use this example of the parking garage. I apologize, it is a very stupid example, but it really hammers the point home. So let's say that Hernan and Anthony are going somewhere in downtown Houston and they need parking. What's their expectation of a parking garage? It's that I can access it, that the lights are on, that it's available, that it's safe, and that my car will still be there when they come back from the restaurant. That's the expectations, right? But if Hernan leaves his window open and they steal Anthony's laptop, or somebody scratches the car because they didn't like what Anthony said, or they just crashed the car and Hernan didn't have insurance, is the garage going to pay for that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that's the same responsibility model that Atlassian, that AWS, that Microsoft has to do so. Could you imagine if you're at Atlassian and every single time somebody misconfigures or deletes something, you have to go into your RDS backups in that distributed model and restore? It is physically impossible. That's why they have to do everything they can to keep the system available, which they do. Right? We see the 5 nines. We know how much effort at Atlassian goes into this to keep the 5 nines and to make sure the system is available. That's why they do system level backups. They have DR, they have orchestration, they have high availability. You don't have to worry about that, but you have to worry about your car because that's your responsibility, your tenant. If you and somebody in the organization leaves a password as password, that's not Atlassian's fault. That is your fault. That is your organization's fault in case there is an insider threat or even somebody's escalating privileges or gets to your organization. The whole point here is that this is an exact relationship where Atlassian is a garage, your projects, your sites, your data, your car, you have to protect it, even though you know that the environment is going to be safe, the environment is going to be available. That's the dynamic, that's a responsibility. By the way, this applies to everything. Whether you're using AWS, whatever your production applications are in the cloud, you're using Kubernetes, you still follow the same responsibility. So these do not change according to the cloud vendors that you're using. They remain the same across the board. So now let's talk a little bit more about what does that specifically mean in the context of backup. Because the Atlassian team and the engineering side and Hernan have already done a good job. But in that same responsibility model, you have to create your own backups. And what I mean here, because sometimes people get confused and they go to the left and they say, well, Atlassian does system level backups. That means that I'm good. I can check backups. I can call the auditors. I'm okay. But the reality of that is a system level backup is only done for reinstantiation in case of an outage. So if there is an outage in US East Zone 1, or there is a major supply chain issue, Atlassian has to use those backups as part of their DR and their BCDR operation. That's part of their response. Those backups are not for me in case I deleted it or changed and modified asset types or misconfigured something. Those are DR backups. Those are system level backups. Sometimes they, out of the kindness of their heart, will also try and help you recover in case you had a very big incident, but it's not legally their responsibility, which is why your role is to actually create those backups. And how you do that is your choice. You can export them, you can script them, you can use a third-party solution like HYCU, but as long as everybody here on this call is fully aware that they can back up their data or that they're responsible for it, that's a good outcome. It doesn't matter if you like HYCU or not. What matters is that everybody here, one way or another, is actually protecting their data, because that's a critical gap. If you don't know if it's happening, you do not want to wait for a deletion. We have so many customers that are coming to us only after something terrible has happened. And that is not the right way to approach it. There is so much knowledge, so much data in Confluence, so many dependencies in JSM. You do not want to lose these things, even your automations as well. You want to make sure that you always have safe copies available too. Now let's go to the next slide. And I want to give you a bit of a story, because sometimes, and they're not actually, I think you brought up this use case. We have a public sector customer who came to us after this very incident, and they did what many people do, that they set object type rather than object, and there was a mass deletion. And in their panic, they called Atlassian, and we can animate to the next slide. And Atlassian, by the way, this is not a bad thing. This is not Atlassian's responsibility. What did they say? Well, it says, look, this is your data. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you with this. And they try. So what happened? Because they didn't know their responsibility, because they didn't know that they were responsible for backups, it took them a 2-week rebuilding period to make sure that they were back on track with their assets. That is a perfect explanation of why you should think about backup now and not when something bad happens. Because especially the larger your organization, the more Murphy's Law applies as well. So we can go to the next slide. So these are the things to think about, especially when the context of backup, in the context of when you're building your requirements and you're trying to decide, do I want to simply tell somebody to manually back these up on demand? Do I want to actually script this on a regular approach and then I can perform a bulk recovery when needed? Or do I want to find a backup solution that allows me to restore this specific data at this point in time? And these are the things to think about. How would you restore your assets, your issues, your knowledge in Confluence, your tickets in Jira, your automation rules, even the conditions, the triggers behind them, but also even everything around the service catalog, everything that you're using in the Atlassian ecosystem, whether it's the plugins or other services that you use around it. The point here is it's something to think about very critically when you are evaluating a vendor. Now, there are several folks out there. There are people offering solutions that are essentially a packaged script. And then there are folks who are offering a purpose-built backup and recovery service that's built on Atlassian, and that is hosted by these partners as well. But let's talk a little bit about the things that you have to think about. And I'll be very honest here. If you have 10, if you have 15 users in your organization, I don't personally believe you need a full backup solution. I think with the right scripting approach, with the right hygiene there, making sure that your scripts are scheduled and you've tested recovery, you're okay. There's no need to go and get a backup and recovery. It would be nice, but if you have 10, 15 users, I think obviously budget is a concern. You can get away with scripting that, and then you'll be okay. But the larger your organization gets, the more, especially if you're in financial services, in healthcare, in the public sector, you have to really think critically too of, okay, I've made a decision that I'm going to evaluate a backup vendor. What are the critical things that you have to think about, not only to make sure that you're safe and sovereign today, but that you future-proofed yourself too? The first thing to ask is, where are my backups stored? And are they in my control? This is a very, very important thing. We live in an era of third-party risk. What are we doing to mitigate third-party risk in Atlassian? We're taking a backup. We're storing the backup. But if I'm storing that backup in somebody else's, in another startup's accounts, that they could also make a mistake and they can delete my data, that's a problem. I'll give you an example. I don't know how many folks on the audience have heard of I think it's called UniSuper, an Australian. Has anyone heard of that incident with the pension fund? You can Google it, pun intended, you can Google it afterwards, but this is a pension fund in Australia that was managing over $125 billion. And someone in Google, whether it was a mistake or an automation gone wrong, they deleted the entire account. Google themselves, Google Cloud themselves deleted the entire account. And the only reason the organization was able to actually restore that is because they had backups in Azure. So you have to think with third-party risk in mind, especially if your organization is larger, or you have very sensitive data, PII and PCI inside of the Atlassian stack as well. So really understanding, can I keep these backups in my control, offsite, but in my control, or am I giving the keys to my kingdom, my critical data, to another vendor with the possibility of Murphy's Law happening as well? The other piece too is, especially if there's European entities involved, where is that data being stored? Where is it being processed to have full control of that? Obviously, everyone here in the US, you have a very good options with every backup vendor to make sure that you keep data in the US, specific to regions as well. But if you have European entities, that's a different beast. So that's something to think about as well. The other one too is, if you have customer-facing experiences, partner-facing experiences, or just very, very critical data that could be compromised. One of the things to mention here is I highly recommend immutable backups. I know that Atlassian does this for their system level. For your tenant, for your data, you should do this yourself too. This is simply enabling object lock. You have a worm-enabled copy. So even if everything explodes in the world, there is a safe copy of your configurations of your data, of Confluence, of Jira, of JSM, even Bitbucket, outside of Atlassian, still accessible. So when things go, if something happens, you can simply restore that back to production. That's a very, very important piece. I'm sure everyone here has heard about the MGM scenario, where it was MGM and Caesars, but they were able to socially engineer the IT team and get super admin privileges via Okta and go in an encryption party of everything. You want to make sure that even if the worst happens, you have safe offsite copies of that data that you can always access, but that are completely detached if somebody were to compromise your organization. The other piece too is, sometimes what I've noticed is you have an IT team that's taking care of you on-prem. So your data center backups are good. It's a VM snapshot. There's probably a backup appliance somewhere, and everyone's happy, and you're storing it for 7 years if you're a healthcare organization. But when you're going to the cloud, you have to think about data retention from your backup perspective. So one of the key things that I mentioned here is you really, really want to be able to make sure that you can define how long you want to keep that data. We have customers who actually have what we call infinite retention periods, because there's like research involved. And if somebody finds something at a specific point in time, they need to be able to go back to that. So they have to keep infinite backups. You simply want to have the ability to store and archive your data in your control without being at the mercy of another vendor. Another very important piece, if something happens and there's a disruption within Atlassian, you want the backup service that you're using to be running outside independently of Atlassian, because otherwise you simply purchase another recycle bin. Atlassian already has native tools. I know they're doing some awesome work with BRIE as well, but you want to make sure that your backup system that you're relying on for worst case scenarios is completely detached to keep the offsite rules, or what we call the 3-2-1 rule. And then the last component to think about here is, can I protect other critical applications? You're using many other things, whether it's from the CI/CD side, on the Git repo, even your production applications. You have to think, am I going to purchase a backup that's only for Atlassian? Or is this the same backup technology and platform that I can use to protect everything? That's a very, very important piece to remember. Especially the larger your organization, the larger the consequences are for this. But Hernan made a good point. Even if you're a small organization, scripting is not ideal for future growth. I fully agree there. I think one of the things to think about here is the concept of bulk recovery is not always best for very large instances where you want to restore something specifically. It could be a very disruptive experience. So as you think about your organization, if you're very mature, if you have a lot of users, a lot of data, you want to make sure that you can perform a granular restore at any point in time. So what I'm going to do here quickly is actually mention a little bit about HYCU, and then from there, let's finish off with questions, Anthony. So as I mentioned, HYCU, we're an Atlassian Ventures firm, and our focus is being able to protect not only Atlassian, but everything in that tool chain as well. If we can go to the next slide. And just so that everyone's fully aware too, we have a net promoter score. I'm not going to get into the commercials that we don't really want to get into a pitch mode here, but we've actually been protecting Atlassian workloads since they were on data center, from the VM to cloud instances to the SaaS application as well. These are the areas that we've been focused on, and it's something that we're continuing to do. If we can go to the next slide. And you can just animate this. Sorry to put you through so much pain, Anthony. So one of the things that I want to mention here is, and that's okay, we have over 80 integrations. Atlassian is a hyper-focus. We have an engineering team focused on this. We want to make sure that we allow you to automate and protect all of your applications, both within Atlassian, but everything outside of your tech stack as well. Even from Atlassian itself and your business systems to tier 1 production applications, they should all be protected with the same rigor. And if we can go to the next one. Now, one thing that I'm going to mention here, and we can probably animate this out a little bit, Anthony. One thing that I'm going to mention here is I'm not going to get into the rest of HYCU because I really want to keep this product focus and about the problem that we're solving. But every single vendor in the Atlassian marketplace gives you good recovery experiences. They do. They're excellent. I know these folks very well. We're all making sure that you can restore down to the attachment or the automation, anything like that you can restore. The big differentiator here to think about is if your organization is very focused on making sure that data is secure and only accessible to you, that's where HYCU comes in. Think of us as a expressway that is that's encrypted from your Atlassian instance to a storage destination of your choice. Whether that's AWS, whether that's Azure, Google Cloud, Wasabi, it's your storage bucket. HYCU can't access it. So from there, you always can control how long that data has stayed there. Who can access that data? Is it safe from ransomware attacks, et cetera, et cetera? So the whole focus here is to make sure that you always have a separate copy that's available to you. And then you're also protecting everything else. But I'm going to stop there because I think the most important piece of today's conversation, and I know this is a 3-part series that Anthony's driving, is you need to make sure that you have a plan to back up and recover your data. I urge you, it doesn't matter what you choose, what strategy you choose, the fact that you've acknowledged that you are protecting your data and that you have a plan and that it's documented is good. Why? So many times we see the pain in folks' faces when they come to us only after something bad has happened. That is not what we want. We want to make sure that everybody's protected, whether it's HYCU or not. You want to be able to protect your data and make sure that you take that into responsibility. The Atlassian team is doing an amazing job. They're going to continue making sure it is highly available, that it is secure. They're very transparent. They're excellent at doing so, but there's an element of responsibility that you have to take as well. But I'll stop there. I wanted to thank everybody for their time. I know we probably have a couple questions, Anthony. And I was going to save everybody from the full product pitch. I think the point here is making sure that everybody starts protecting their data now and chooses a strategy that works for them.
All right, so if anybody would like, you can scan that QR code to get more information about HYCU. And if you have any questions, though, please post them in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them. And we definitely thank you for joining the event, and we'll be doing our giveaways in a few moments. All right, let's see.
Hernan is giving away a free backup script for the lucky winner.
All right. Well, I'll say for the next 2 people that ask a question, we'll give you a gift card. So for participating.
I see Susan's question here on the 3-2-1 rule. So this is an excellent question, Susan. Just for everybody who may not be able to read it, it's would you provide some examples of the 3 ways 3-2-1 to store your backups? So I'll give you the example from HYCU's perspective, but this is the 3-2-1 rule for those who maybe are a little bit more who just started in IT. This is something that we've been talking about forever. From the era of photography, you always want to have 3 copies of your data on 2 media types and 1 offsite. So the way that we approach this is you want to take a snapshot of that data. You want to then have a backup of that data that's stored completely offsite. So the way that you're able to do it is you assign a backup policy, and every single day at, let's say, 6 a.m., a copy of your project is taken, or a snapshot is taken, stored locally. And then you also have a backup that is stored in something like AWS or Amazon S3. And that allows you to keep the 3-2-1 rule. So if something happens here, there's always an offsite copy to restore from. This same rule, Susan, should apply to every SaaS application that is deemed critical in your organization. Having that all centralized on an S3 bucket, regardless of your choice of flavor, is super important. And if you're going to script that, Susan, the best thing that you can do is also just make sure that you also still store that in an S3 bucket. Why? I see too many scenarios where people download the exports to their personal device. They download it in an unencrypted format, and then that person goes on vacation. And if somebody else deletes a bunch of attachments or pages, the person that actually has the backups is not there. It's in their hard drive. You want to make sure that it is in an accessible location, which is preferably object storage.
All right. And then Hannah has a question. She says, I just started using Jira Service Management project at the moment. What additional topics besides backup should we consider as our responsibility? Anything else we can highlight?
That's actually a great question. So Hannah, one of the big areas here is actually, this has nothing to do with HYCU, but it's just something that we always urge, is identity access management, right? Well, we've seen some pretty exciting announcements from Atlassian around Guard, but what was formerly Atlassian Access as well is simply making sure that you're following the guidelines that they provide you on accessing accounts. Especially, and if you're offboarding, if you're working with other vendors, if you're working with partners, developers, you want to make sure that your access is managed effectively, that you have visibility, because the last thing you want is an insider threat or somebody finding open access to your information and then wreaking havoc. So following the Atlassian's identity access management guidelines are super important. And of course, also the basics with MFA and single sign-on as well.
All right. Anything you would like to add, Jeev or Sridhar, from Atlassian's perspective?
Nothing more to add from my end.
Yep, sounds good.
How about you, Hernan? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, you're asking me, Anthony? No, definitely. That was a good presentation, and it makes sense from from the vendor perspective. Yeah, nothing to add from our end. Thank you.
All right. All right. So we'll go on.
And sorry, I was on mute.
No problem. All right. So Raul asked a question around point in time, full incremental, differential, or mirror backups. If you can add a little context around that, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to add one more thing for Hannah, because I've also seen this as well, is making sure that there's a consolidated ownership and administrative rights of all of your sites and projects. The last thing that you want is errant departments doing their own thing and then not following the rules that you've set in your organization and the guidelines. So we've seen it where the administrator is able to control things, and then other departments are like, oh, what's that work management thing? I want to do that. Or I want to use Trello. And then they don't follow any of the rules because it's outside of IT. A lot of the risk comes from that. So making sure that you keep tight ownership and guidelines inside of the organization is also going to help, because an application can become critical like this, right? Where marketing spins up a new project and all of a sudden everything's in Trello and the password is marketing at your domain and its password, right? So we see this behavior all the time. This is super dangerous. Make sure that you centralize ownership of all the instances and projects in your organization. And then Raul, the question that you had is, for all of our applications that we're protected from Atlassian to even Okta and Entra ID and Git repositories, right now we do a point in time, and then we're adding incremental backups as well. And then we'll even be able to compare differentials for you as well. So not only are we encrypting and compressing all of the backups as well, but we're also going to be doing differentials for high change rates too. That's a great question.
All right. I'd like to thank everybody for presenting. Definitely appreciate all the information you provided. We definitely appreciate everybody attending and spending your hour with us. Look forward to having you attend our future events. We do have an event coming up in person on October 9th in the Houston area. So if you're local and would like to attend, it'd be great to have you. And if you can, subscribe to our community page, our ACE page, and our LinkedIn page, it'd be greatly appreciated. I posted those links earlier in the chat. And look forward to seeing everybody again. Thank you very much. And I'll give you back the rest of your day.